There's a particular kind of silence that follows a standing ovation. It is the silence of a crowd that has just witnessed something they will carry with them for the rest of their lives. For decades, Wayne Newton lived inside that silence. He was the man who filled it, who owned it, who made it feel like the most natural thing in the world. Night after night, year after year, he walked onto the stages of Las Vegas and transformed ordinary evenings into something people would talk about for generations. They called him Mr. Las Vegas, and that title wasn't handed to him. He earned it, note by note, show by show, across one of the most remarkable careers in American entertainment history. But fame, as it turns out, is not the same thing as security. And success, no matter how dazzling it looks from the outside, can hide 1,000 quiet disasters. Today, Wayne Newton is 83 years old. The velvet voice is a little softer now. The tuxedos have been swapped for smaller stages and more intimate venues. And the man who once commanded sold-out crowds of thousands now performs in settings where the audience can actually see the lines on his face. Those lines tell a story, and it is not the story most people expected when they watched him shine at the height of his powers. It is a story of ambition and excess, of dangerous associations and devastating financial collapse, of lawsuits and betrayals, and a dream estate that turned into a money pit. It is, above all else, a deeply human story about what happens when the empire you build is constructed on a foundation that cannot hold the weight you keep placing on it. To understand where Wayne Newton is today, you have to go back to where he started, because the distance between those 2 points is what makes his story so extraordinary and so heartbreaking all at once. Wayne Newton came into this world in 1942 in Norfolk, Virginia, born into a family that had very little in the way of material wealth, but a great deal in the way of heart. His heritage was a blend of Cherokee and German ancestry. And from a very young age, it was clear that this boy had something inside him that most people simply do not possess. He could sing, not just carry a tune, but genuinely sing in a way that stopped people in their tracks and made them feel something they hadn't expected to feel. By the time he was 6 years old, he was already performing alongside his older brother Jerry, and the two of them had dreams that were far larger than the small Virginia towns where they first found their footing. The Newton brothers eventually packed up and headed to Phoenix, Arizona, where they began booking local gigs and slowly building a reputation as a duo worth watching. Wayne was young, gifted, and burning with ambition. He had a charm that couldn't be taught and a stage presence that seemed almost impossible for someone his age. People noticed, and it wasn't long before the notice extended far beyond Arizona. The moment that changed everything came in 1962 when Wayne Newton made his national television debut on The Jackie Gleason Show. This was not a minor appearance on some regional program. The Jackie Gleason Show was one of the most watched entertainment programs in America, and being invited onto its stage was the kind of opportunity that most performers only dreamed about. Wayne did not waste it. He walked out in front of millions of television viewers and delivered a performance that left people talking. His voice, warm and smooth and full of genuine emotion, connected with audiences in a way that felt immediate and personal. He was 19 years old, and he had just announced himself to the entire country. The years that followed were a whirlwind of success. Wayne signed with Capitol Records and began releasing music that climbed the charts with what seemed like effortless regularity. His recording of Danky Shone became a genuine cultural landmark, the kind of song that burrows its way into the collective memory of a generation and simply stays there. It was a hit, yes, but it was more than that. It was a demonstration of his range, his ability to find the emotional core of a song and bring it to the surface in a way that felt entirely his own. Radio stations played it constantly. Fans adored it, and Wayne Newton's name became one that Americans recognized and responded to with genuine warmth. But it was Las Vegas that truly claimed him. Beginning in the early 1960s and accelerating through the decade and into the 1970s, Wayne Newton became the defining performer of the Las Vegas Strip. He performed with a frequency and a consistency that was almost superhuman, appearing night after night in venues that sold out week after week. His energy on stage was inexhaustible, His connection with audiences was something that other performers studied and marveled at. He set records for attendance and for the sheer number of performances delivered, and at his peak, he was unquestionably the biggest draw the city had to offer. Las Vegas and Wayne Newton became so thoroughly intertwined that it was nearly impossible to think of one without the other. He was the city's human embodiment, the living proof that talent and charisma could be turned into something permanent. He was also, by any reasonable measure, extraordinarily wealthy. The money flowed in on a scale that most people cannot imagine, and Wayne Newton spent it in a manner that reflected both his genuine love of the finer things and a certain fundamental disregard for the reality of what sustainable financial management actually requires. The trouble began in ways that were easy to miss at first. Behind the sequin curtains and the standing ovations, the financial architecture of Wayne Newton's life was far more fragile than it appeared. He had always lived large. That was part of the brand, part of what people expected from Mr. Las Vegas. The cars, the horses, the entourage, the properties, the sheer scale of the lifestyle he maintained was staggering. And for a long time, the income kept pace with the spending. But then, gradually and then all at once, it didn't. The 1980s brought the first truly alarming cracks. Wayne Newton, in a move that reflected both his ambition and perhaps a certain overconfidence in his own ability to navigate complex situations, became involved in the attempted purchase of the Aladdin Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip. On paper, this made a kind of sense. Wayne Newton was Vegas royalty. Why shouldn't he own a piece of the kingdom? But the way he went about pursuing this dream introduced him to figures and associations that would follow him for the rest of his life. In 1980, NBC broadcast an investigative report that accused Wayne Newton of having ties to organized crime, specifically suggesting that he had worked with individuals connected to the mob in order to facilitate his business dealings around the Aladdin Hotel. The man named in those reports, Guido Penosi, was alleged to have significant connections to organized criminal enterprises, and the suggestion that Nevada's most beloved entertainer had been doing business with such a person was, to put it mildly, a bombshell. Wayne Newton fought back with everything he had. He sued NBC for libel, insisting that the report was false and that the network had destroyed his reputation with reckless disregard for the truth. The legal battle that followed was lengthy and expensive. At one point, Wayne was awarded a judgment of $19.3 million in damages, a number that seemed to vindicate him completely. But the legal system is a long and winding road, and that judgment was eventually reduced and then overturned entirely by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. In the end, he received nothing, and the accusations, once aired publicly, had already done their damage. People remember the story. They remember the name Penosi. They remembered the suggestion that maybe Mr. Las Vegas wasn't quite as clean as he appeared. Reputations, once scratched, never fully returned to their original luster. The financial collapse that followed the 1980s was not sudden. It was grinding and relentless and deeply public, which made it all the more painful. By the early 1990s, the bills had accumulated to a level that no amount of performing could easily address. Wayne Newton owed money in directions that seemed to multiply the more closely anyone looked. The Internal Revenue Service had become a persistent presence in his life, pursuing unpaid tax obligations that ran into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Other debts pushed his total obligations into the tens of millions. In 1992, the situation reached a crisis point that could no longer be managed quietly. Wayne Newton filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. In theory, Chapter 11 is a tool for reorganization rather than liquidation, a way to restructure debt and keep the lights on while working toward a more sustainable arrangement. In practice, for Wayne Newton, it was a humiliating public confession that the empire was in serious trouble. The bankruptcy proceedings played out in newspapers and on television, and the man who had been the symbol of Las Vegas glamour was now a cautionary tale about what happens when income and expenditure drift too far apart for too long. To his credit, Wayne Newton did not disappear. He did not retreat from the public eye and quietly wait for things to resolve themselves. Instead, he did what he had always done. He worked. He performed. He showed up on stage night after night and gave audiences the show they had come to see, even when the pressure he was operating under would have broken most people entirely. There was something both admirable and deeply sad about this period of his life, this image of a man whose talent remained fully intact, even as the structures around him were crumbling. As the 1990s wore on, new chapters of difficulty kept presenting themselves. One of the most damaging involved his professional partnership with Tony Orlando, the singer and entertainer who had been a significant figure in American popular culture since the early 1970s. The two men had decided to go into business together, opening a theater in Las Vegas that they named Talk of the Town, derived from their combined initials. The venue had a capacity of over 2,000 seats and was supposed to represent a new chapter for both men, a joint venture that would combine their drawing power and establish them as a formidable team in the entertainment landscape. It did not work out that way. Attendance was consistently disappointing. The theater regularly operated at less than half capacity, and the financial losses began mounting almost immediately. The lease they had signed was expensive, and the revenues they were generating were nowhere near sufficient to cover their obligations. Tension between the two partners grew as the situation deteriorated. Then came the accusation that transformed a business failure into a genuine scandal. Tony Orlando's son discovered recording devices hidden in the private office that he and Wayne Newton shared. The implication was immediate and devastating. Tony Orlando accused Wayne Newton of bugging the office, of secretly recording their private conversations and whatever business discussions had taken place in that space. Wayne denied any involvement, but the accusation had already landed. Trust between the two men evaporated instantly, and Tony Orlando ended the partnership and walked away. Losing Tony Orlando as a business partner was a serious blow, not just financially, but reputationally. The bugging accusation, denied but never definitively resolved in the public mind, added another dark thread to the narrative that was forming around Wayne Newton's name. He was no longer just a beloved entertainer with financial problems. He was a man whose character had been questioned in multiple arenas, and the accumulation of those questions was taking a real and lasting toll on how people perceived him. Perhaps nothing illustrated the arc of Wayne Newton's story more vividly than the fate of Casa de Shenandoah. This sprawling estate